and to the analysis of Shields and Brooks, Syndicated columnist Mark Shields, New York Times columnist David Brooks. Mark, last night Gingrich was clearly the major target of just about everybody. How did he go through it?
Well, Jim, there's a great question. If it's a two-candidate race, all right, it's Shields against Brooks. Shields attacks Brooks, and either Brooks benefits from the attack or he's hurt by the attack. But when you get Lara in and you get 7 people and the attack is made, then you don't know who the beneficiary is. In other words, Romney did not go after Gingrich last night.
He stayed off.
He stayed off him, and he let Michelle Bachmann, who I thought did it pretty adroitly, and Ron Paul. So how did he do it? He showed equanimity. He showed, I thought, a couple of flashes of what we've come to expect of Newt Gingrich's characteristic arrogance, but he didn't lose his temper. But I do think that she stung and hurt with her business on Freddie Mac, and the timing couldn't have been worse given today's stories of the indictment of the leadership of Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae.
What's your thought about that?
Yeah, I mean, if you want to judge the whole momentum of the race, you'd have to say Romney is beginning to reassert himself. I thought he had quite a good campaign or debate performance, especially after inferior performances the last couple of times. Gingrich was not knocked out by any means, but he was bruised around a little. And then the other big thing that happened was Ron Paul. Ron Paul was very aggressive on not being assertive about Iran. And that's simply not an acceptable policy in Republican circles.
Republicans want the U.S. to be
a strong foreign policy.
Yeah.
And so there's a libertarian wing, but it's just not that big, especially in pretty socially conservative Iowa. So I thought the big movement was Paul moving down, Gingrich getting hit a little, and then Romney reasserting himself. And the other thing that's happening simultaneously outside the realm of the debates is there actually is an air and ground game in the primary states, which we don't see as much if you're not in Iowa. But the fact is Romney and Paul and the others, they actually have money, they have organization, they have structure. And they're beginning to take control of the debate with ads and other things. And I think that's one of the reasons you're beginning to see Gingrich's poll numbers flat or even declining a little.
Yeah, I disagree on Paul. I disagree with David on Ron Paul. Yep. I mean, first of all, Iowa, it isn't a Democrat versus Republican. Iowa historically is an anti-interventionist state. Always has been. I mean, H.R. Gross of Iowa, one of the great isolationists ever. The real hotbed of opposition to America's war into World War II was centered in the Midwest in places like Iowa. Yes, the Democrats are more dovish, but I don't think the Republicans in Iowa, while they are socially conservative, are that gripped with war fever. My one criticism of the moderators last night was their whole foreign policy, national security question was about Iran. They never once asked a question about Iraq, which was ending, or Afghanistan. It was centered totally on Iran. And the Republicans just, they can't stop themselves. I mean, they just start rattling sabers. They can't do it quickly enough. They don't want to pay for it. They don't want to be involved in it. But, boy, they love war.
They love war, David?
Yeah, I think that's
Republicans love war?
A little fair. I do think it's true. I've said this before on the program, and I think there are experts who agree with this, that within a year, Iran will be a major story as they get close to some sort of, not a deliverable nuclear warhead, but close to a step in their nuclear program. So I think it was appropriate to ask about Iran. That is the looming crisis, at least in the Middle East. The Ron Paul thing is interesting because, just speaking in political terms, Mitt Romney needs Ron Paul to do well. Ron Paul takes votes away from Gingrich and whoever the conservative wing is. So if I think, and I still think, Paul
How
needs
does
to start
Paul take votes away from them?
Because basically there's a moderate group, which tends to go toward Romney, or if you want to put it a suburban group. And then there's a more rural, more conservative group that is split among all these other conservatives.
Perry,
and all the non-Romneys.
Yeah.
And if Paul takes a chunk out of Gingrich, well, that brings Gingrich down. And if Paul disappears, then Gingrich probably goes up a little.
What do you make of David mentioned it, there have been some kind of fragmentary polls today saying, oh, maybe the surge, the Gingrich surge is over. Do you sense anything like that?
Well, what I've sensed is, first of all, how publicly Republicans have gone in denouncing him. I mean, in very scorching terms. I mean, whether Joe Scarborough, who was a class of '94 Republican in the House, now an MSNBC host, saying he's a bad man. and Peter King, congressman from New York.
National Review magazine.
Megalomaniac, National Review. But I mean, National Review did it editorially. These are people who are in office or in public life, and they're just standing up there and saying, don't do it. And many of whom voted with him and supported him when he came in. Susan Molinari of New York, Jim Talent of Missouri. I mean, so I think that there's a sense of the electability question with Newt Gingrich has really been opened and
no way he could beat Obama.
Yeah, I mean, you sit right now, we have the Wall Street Journal NBC poll, the president is either even or slightly behind a generic Republican. He's 2 points ahead of Mitt Romney, and he's 10 points ahead of Newt Gingrich. And while Romney leads the president by 18 points among voters over the age of 65, Gingrich is barely 3 points ahead of the president. And that's got to be a big Republican.
Right, and there was a poll out of the 12 swing states that has Romney beating the president handily in those swing states, Gingrich just barely marching by. Among Republicans, though, it's interesting. They think Gingrich is as electable or more electable.
Why? On what basis?
They're living in an ideological cocoon. The fact is, the reason a lot of people who worked with him, like Molinari and Talent and such, are so angry is not because it's electability, I don't think. I think it's because they worked with the guy. And I've said it before, all the people who worked with Romney like him and want him to be president. All the people who work with Gingrich want Romney to be president. It's just the fact of working with him. And, there were stories of, just inconstancy, sort of a rhetorical overload, which gets you the bad press, and then you don't back it up with a strong policy. You back it up with a weak policy. That's the worst of both worlds.
Speaking of working together, this is called a segue in television. The Congress of the United States is not still up to it, is it? I mean, they're on another one of these brinkmanship addiction.
They're going to resolve it.
Are they?
They are. I think I've spoken to people. They're all pretty confident they're going to resolve it one way or another. What's been interesting to me is the structure of the whole thing. The Democrats want to give the Republicans a tax break, tax cuts for the American people, and the Republicans are saying no, we want more. It's a bit like a parent going to a kid and say, "We're going to take you to Disney World," and the kids say, "We'll agree to go to Disney World if you give us an Xbox and an iPhone." And the parents say, "No, but you'll love Disney World. Give us the Xbox." And then they say, "Okay, we'll give you the Xbox and Disney World." That's sort of the structure of this thing. It's a little weird, but this is why the Republicans always win. They're getting concessions for things they already want.
You see it that way?
I don't see it the same way. I think that, first of all, we're stuck in this morass until voters decide that one party is going to be accountable. I mean, as long as you have the rule in the Senate that 40 senators can stop anything and prevent anything from happening, whether they're Democrats or Republicans or a combination thereof, you're going to have this deadlock. And what we have now in 2011, for the first time, we're going to have appropriations that will take us all the way through the next fiscal year. That's the end of September. So there won't be any recurrence of what we've been through in 2011, in 2012, of the stop and the threat and everything else.
I mean, we're going to close the government down. No, we're not going to close the government down.
There's no debt ceiling vote coming up. Okay. So in that sense, there's no chance for the Republicans to kind of hold hostage and the non-negotiable demands again. I mean, there's no way in the world what we've watched is going to double the approval rating of Congress to 18%. I mean, make no mistake about that. But I do think that what we have, quite bluntly, is a case that the Democrats have finessed the tax deal with the Republicans for the tax break. The Republicans don't want to be on record. A majority of both parties don't want to be on record opposing tax cuts for 160 million people. And I think that's it. And I think what we may see is a showdown then with the extension of the Bush tax cuts eventually.
And what about the pipeline thing?
Yeah, well, the Republicans see that as an excellent issue because it's an issue that splits the Democratic Party. The unions tend to want the pipeline. The environmentalists tend not to want it. But I'm still struck by the overall telos, the overall atmosphere of the thing. Republicans are willing to risk something extremely unpopular, like shutting down the government or not getting this payroll tax thing in order to get what they want. And I don't know whether it's conviction, ideology, or just really tough politics. But again and again, they've been willing to risk things that are really unpopular.
All right, we've got a couple of minutes left.
Okay.
And I don't want to make the same mistake that you said the moderator made and not talk about the Iraq War. Came to a conclusion. What are your thoughts about it? Was it worth it in the cost to Americans first? in terms of lives and money, and also, of course, in lives of the Iraqis?
No, it was not worth it. This was a war that the generals opposed. Generals like Brent Scowcroft and Anthony Zinni and Joe Hoare and Norman Schwarzkopf and Erich Shinseki, people who had seen combat and tasted it. It was a war favored by civilians who had never experienced combat, whether it was Richard Pearl or Paul Wolfowitz or Don Rumsfeld or George Bush or Dick Cheney. And the reality was that we went into war under false pretenses. We went into war that was not paid for. We went into a war on a go-it-alone policy, and 4,500 American homes will not have a son, daughter, husband, or wife this Christmas or any Christmas in the future that will see their children grow up as a consequence of it. And 33,000 are wounded, many in a disabling way. I think it's left us weakened. I think it's left us with less influence. I don't think Iraq is...
We, the United States of America.
United States of America, and it's left strategically, the greatest advantage has gone in that neighborhood to Iran, which now has an influence disproportionate to what it had before this war began.
David, how would you see it?
Yeah, I don't know whether it was worth it. The cost was obviously high in lives, treasure, national morale. But we're left with this thing. We basically had centuries of stasis and stability and stagnation in the Middle East, which produced terrorism, but also produced a crushing of human capital for century after century. 9/11 happens. The Taliban is thrown out. Saddam is deposed. People are voting with purple fingers. And now we have a moment of turmoil. We don't know how this turmoil, it could be worse, it could be better, but it's a moment of turmoil. I think the Iraq War and the deposition of Saddam Hussein was part of the things that encouraged and instigated the turmoil. It's very messy, very complicated, but in 100 years or in 50 years, we'll look back and see where the turmoil went, and maybe we'll have a better sense of how the Iraqi elections, getting rid of Saddam, getting rid of the Taliban, helped lead to maybe getting rid of Mubarak, Gaddafi, and all the rest.
So your sense of it now is that it's possible that it could turn out very positive.
It's possible it could turn out badly. I say that with no confidence, but I would say we've moved from a period of stagnation to a period of turmoil. Whether that's good or bad turmoil, history will judge.
In a word?
It's a terrible, terrible policy to go to war. The most serious decision a country can make with absolutely no justification. I mean, let's be very blunt about it. Al-Qaeda was responsible for 9/11. Iraq had nothing to do with it. Iraq had no weapons of mass destruction and no ability or capacity to deliver those weapons that were non-existent.
And you don't dispute that, David?
No, we obviously thought what we thought back then, but I always thought that the need to disrupt the Middle East was one of the reasons why it was necessary.
Unstated.
Unstated, and goodbye.